Top of the day to you on this inspirational journey as we go to and fro on this earth. I hope all is well. I am that reporter reporting to you the way, truth, and life concerning you, how you can elevate yourself, how you can be more than what you want and desire to be, how you can level up. First, it dealt with facing yourself, and now we have made it to a step which is still like facing yourself, but now we encountering the facing the enemy. And sometimes the enemy is not on the outside of us, it's in the inside of us. And I know you heard some people saying, ah, man, we could be our own worst enemies. So let's deal with that. Okay, if you want some solid ground work, go to Galatians chapter 5, and maybe other books that's, you know, in the word that will reveal to you the different types of things that we're going to talk about today concerning the flesh and the spirit. So as we deal with facing our enemies, we're going to start with within. Okay, so it's things that that's deep conflicts within us. All right, so it's like a pull of the spirit versus a pull of the flesh. All right, so and these are what these desires of the flesh is. It kind of helps us minimize um, our becoming as we desire to level up to become more than what we are. There are some stumbling blocks or some things that's in our life that we need to kind of like change or to rid them or cultivate others when it comes to becoming more of a good spirit and not, so much of all these things that we're about to mention, as we call them, according to the word, desires of the flesh. Okay, these are like impulse driven type parts of us, self-centered type parts of us that we just want to kind of like be aware, of these inner patterns that happens in our lives. And they just, to me, they like flare-ups. I mean, I encounter them sometimes, and then sometimes I'm aware of them where I can just react more in a spiritual way than in a flesh way. So we're going to discuss like some of the differences as we sing. So part of us that wants to be in control is like the instinct that pulls us away from our godly character. It's habits and cravings that feel good in the moment, but later on it's like damage us in the long run. We could have popped off and said things to someone, and we didn't mean to say it like that, but how it came out, that's what it is. And sometimes what comes out, you may not all the time will be able to draw that back in. Sometimes you have to explain or sugarcoat, or look, it just is what it is. And sometimes like our ego is driven. It's self-driven ego. Sometimes you see people like, oh man, their ego is so big. And some of these things are found in us, and we may not see it unless someone, that a good friend or someone that's upset would like kind of like put it out there. And then instead of us reacting, we can kind of, take it in and kind of meditate on it. Like, okay, is this really me? And start to self-evaluate yourself to see whether or not you want that to be part of you or not. So the works of the flesh, we should not be ashamed, but it's just to show us what life looks like when we are driven by our impulse instead of by like God's spirit. Okay, what about jealousy? I used to have a little jealousy in me. I've been working on it, so I don't find that it's such a big thing in me as much once I recognized that I had that jealous spirit in me. Now, all these is a type of spirit of the devilish type spirits. These are ways of Lucifer. This is his characteristics, his things that's within us. Remember, we have two natures. We have a godly nature and we have a sinful nature. So you got to remember which one that we want to feed. But how do you know what you're feeding if you don't recognize it and be aware of these different inner patterns that we have within us? So you have jealousy. What about fits of anger? I used to get like straight up anger. If you answer me correctly or right, I'd be like, I need to hear it now, So sometimes those fits of anger, or just, someone say something and I just like, before I know it, I done popped off, which once I cooled down and realized I could have had a misunderstanding or whatever, then now I'm shamed and don't want to go back and say I'm sorry because I'm too shamed. But all these things can happen to us. It's naturally, but once you're aware of it, you can help yourself. You could do better. So what about rivalry and competition for status? Everybody want to be, have a stat up there, and you're doing it for rivalry and competition. And sometimes those rivalries and competitions could bring you to a place just to win that you may not want to go. I mean, I remember, in history, there was some ice skater, and there was another ice skater that was real good, and her coach, or they decided to do something that was harmful and cause another skater, some discomfort. I don't remember quite whether it cost their life. So make sure you Google search, tell you that all the time. And then there was other instances where people had rivalries and competitions and stats, and people lost their lives. So you just be mindful of that to figure out, is that in you? And this is what it's all about, self-evaluation, trying to figure out, is this is in me? So we talked about jealousy, fits of anger, rivalry and competition for stats, envy, division, factions, hostility toward others. Are these things found in us? These are eternal relational desires that could be within us that we may not know or recognize, because no one never said, or we haven't really mentally figured out that, oh, this is what this is. No one have never put a name on it for us. So desires that distort intimacy. So this have to do with your sex, your sexual desires, your sexual immortality, your impurities, you living for pleasure alone. Sometimes that we could be looking for love all in the wrong places. You give yourself, or you decide that, oh, I need someone to look at me. And so you would go to some type of, sexual way to get a like or get someone to look at you. And then when you have that look, then you want to like, okay, well, I didn't expect this. And then you want to go off, but you got to see that you have put yourself in a situation. And so this is some of the things that would come off, or appeal, or this is what it looks like, even though that wasn't your intention to do. So just be mindful about, your intimacy about yourself. Desires to distort worship. So we have idolatry. So anything that we put above God, that is an idol. So that's how that is. So anything that we put above God, considered an idol. Or sorcery, seeking spiritual power apart from God. Now, I know there's a lot of, sorceries, and sorcery is written in the word. So it is something that is what it, that's true. There are sorceries out there. Now, the sorcery, spiritual powers apart from God, is sometimes that people would speak, what they call it, voodoo, hoodoo, um, hexing people, speaking curses on people, putting curses on them or whatever. And all I can say is it's in the word, so I cannot deny that particular spiritual power, because it is such. But if you're protected and you pray and you cover yourself with, the word, just as they speak words from a book, you have your book, and you can speak those words as a covering, as a protection over you, that whoever do this harm, you send that back to them where it come from, because, you covered by, God's word and his power. So just remember that. But sometimes with those sorceries, I did read in the word that sometimes that comes back on you. Not all the time that, it would be successful. And we learned that with a cartoon, Tiana in uh which she's a prince, so Tiana and the Frog. And it's a cartoon, so make sure you go watch it. It's dealt in Louisiana and New Orleans, the Bayou, and they talked about all the things and the different choices and things that we make, and then what extent that we would go to in order to get what we want. So sometimes, like those desires, we may receive them, but at the end, there's always a price, there's always a cost. And like you, as you see, there's sometimes in the celebrities that we look at today, or in just life general, there's always a cost, there's always a price, there's always a sacrifice. So, so what about desires that numb or escape? Now, a lot of us fall into this category because of the just the pain of life itself, and not all the time that we may know how to govern. Some of us would dab in drunkenness, getting drunkenness to the point that you wake up and you don't know where you are, where you've been, or whatever. Wild parties, escapisms that we, may encounter or do just to, feel numb from the pain or escape from our situations and problems. Well, sometimes that's what we enter. That's the things that we do sometimes. All right. And so it's in the word. I mean, our ancestors did it, and that's how we got this history from their experiences. And this is, God knows, he understands what happened dealing with this flesh and the things that it could evolve. That's why he was so against when Lucifer had questioned a part about, the code of, this flesh becoming, uh, having a choice, and choosing of the spirits, which way that you want to go. Not all the time that you want to come in all your glory. Don't be good all the time. Sometimes it can be a damnation to you instead of, a rise. And so this is what this is about. The contrast would be, okay, so you have like about the flesh, and then the contrast is about the fruit of the spirit. To dealing with this here, when they talked about the flesh, then they give you a list also about the fruit of the spirit. So if you want to develop your fruit of the spirit, it has a list in there in Galatians. But right now we're going to deal with the flesh, because we never get to talk more about, people don't want to fully give comprehension about our flesh and where we are inside to deal with our inner demons, our inner, enemies that we have. So we have to understand that in order to get where you're going, you have to stop some of the bad stuff. And I remember it was I think it was Nipsey Hussle, and he was talking about how he used to, I guess, smoke weed and drink and this and that. But when he became a business person and he tried to get where he wanted to go, he did not want to go to deal with a business proposition smelling like that or full of drinking. That just was not a good look, he felt. And so, he set that aside for a particular time, because I'm not for sure whether he quit or not, but I know whenever he dealt with business, he came in there proper. So, and he didn't come in there with, all those other habits and ways. Not when you're dealing with business. You can't come, not focused. So, and I think that's one of the things that he was dealing with, that he wanted to kind of clean up whenever he thought that that could be a hindrance, whenever you have all these other different spirits within you working. So you want to walk by the spirit, and the desires of the flesh will eventually start to lose some of their power. Okay. So we wanted to know, like, how do we recognize some of the flesh? How do we recognize the flesh in your daily life? So whenever we recognize the flesh in our daily life, it isn't about we beating ourselves up. It's not that we hunting for sin. No, it's just becoming aware. We just want to be aware of the inner patterns that pull away, and then that way we can kind of like change some of the situations, some of the ways that we may act and handle ourselves. And so we just want to bring that to awareness to ourselves. That way we may govern ourselves a little bit better. So so the first reaction of the flesh could be something like irritation that flares up before you think. Now I have that problem. I'm working on it. Sometimes the irritation would flare up before I even think about it. And next thing you know, words just start flowing, and then sometimes, okay, what did I misunderstand? You have to catch yourself. Did you misunderstand what they were actually saying before you just like start going off or getting mad for no apparently reason, when it just probably was just a question or a discussion, So then what about being defensive and reaction when corrected? Sometimes that when you're being corrected, and I think I found myself in this category a couple of times, that even though I'm being defensive when corrected, it's just like, okay, I understand what you corrected me about, but did you not see the bigger picture? Or how you corrected me, and then you allow others to get away with whatever they're doing. And so you looking at me all the time like, why you chastising me when here it is, you don't say anything to them, and you can't say that you don't because they keep doing it, that kind of thing. So I'll be quick to say irritation, that's a flare up for me, and I'm just gonna go ahead and confess my sins, maybe just in case that you may have the same flare up with you. I have it with me, but I have tried to put in practice, don't worry about everybody else. Deal with things that pertain to me. And try to shade off looking at if anyone else do wrong, that's just be on them. Just handle your business, deal with just you, and don't worry about it. Even though sometimes it is hard, but I'm learning. And I find that the progress is, I'm not getting into it with people as much. I'm less stressed, and I enjoy myself. I enjoy myself, and I didn't know I could enjoy myself as much, and it's like self-love. Okay, so it desires to prove yourself or to win an argument. That's me. I'm so guilty about that. But if you wrong me, I'm gonna prove myself. I'm sorry. That's just in me. And I got to stand for what is right. I'm not gonna let you make me feel that I'm wrong if I know I'm right. But then sometimes you just let it go. Because that's what some people say, don't worry about it, just let it go, And then sometimes we have to let it go and let God fight our battles. But we be so busy trying to fight our own battles. I'm guilty. I'm sorry about that. But then look, I'm being aware of this. And these were things about you come to recognize, and then you acknowledge and have accountability for it. And I just pray, Lord, help me be a better me, and bring to my spirit, may the Holy Spirit bring to my recognition whenever something happened to me like this, that I'll be a little bit more aware and less quick to react, to it. Cravings for something that promises relief but leaves you empty. So sometimes we have cravings for things like I used to be an emotional eater. So when I'm upset about stuff and I just be eating, I crave sugar or crave, whatever, I'm just eating. And it leaves me empty because, like, okay, I done ate all this. Now I'm upset because, now I added all these extra, and I've been going so good with eating healthy. And now I done ate something just crazy because I'm upset, or, that's, it's just my relief. So sometimes that's how we are. So it's about the flesh reacts and the spirit responds. So when some do something, you're going to react. But if you say that I'm such and such, then I would take into consideration and I would respond to it by changing, or like, okay, yes, I am like that. And I didn't know it. And then I begin to work on myself. So that's like where it reacts versus responds. So we're going to pay attention to what pulls us away from being our godly character. Sometimes we avoid prayer, we avoid reading the word. We avoid being honest, avoid community things that would help us along our way. We avoid surrendering to what is right versus what is wrong. And we use the flesh to try to stay in control of what and we always like want to defend the things that we do that is not correct. Um, in the flesh, it just hates to depend on God. That's just a fleshly thing. We want to depend on our own inner stuff, how we feel. And then it's just like we'll tell ourselves, I deserve this. I don't need no help. I'll deal with God later. Just I'm right, they wrong, stuff like that. I need this to feel better. These are things that are inner dialogue that we would do to ourselves, to help that fleshly nature be at comfort. But the spirit, it would speak what peace and clarity and humility. And the flesh will always speak with a sense of urgency or entitlement or self-protection. That's things of the flesh versus things of the spirit. Okay, so we definitely got to watch out for the patterns that damage relationships. And those, remember, I said jealousy, comparison, silent resentment. We resent others, passive aggressive behavior, needing to be noticed or praised, withdrawing when offended. Now, somebody offend me, I might respect that title, but I might not respect the person, or I might not fool with you. I still speak, but I would leave. I done learned to just, move on out the way, to work around you. I can work with you, but I can work around you too. I handle you like, okay, you're not even there. So I know that's bad too, but I'm working on it. I handle you like you're not even there, walk right past you, which is disrespectful, but oh well, this is the way of the world. This is what we doing. Yeah, I'm wrong for that. So I'm gonna have to investigate in that one. All right, so notice what you run to for comfort, escapism, pleasure, numbing, distraction, control. But then Spirit invites us to pray, to slow down, to be honest, to seek wisdom, and to rest in God. So sometimes they say, well, just give it to God, let God handle it. He can do more damage than we ever could when it comes to a person. But sometimes we feel like God not working fast enough. We want them to get that late now. Set them on fire. Set them on fire right now. It's things like that we want them done, because our timing is not God timing. God timing is not ours. And we want that instant microwave. But sometimes God don't move like that. He don't move like that. So be a fruit checker. You're going to check that fruit. What is producing in us, in me, producing in you? Is it chaos, anxiety, shame, division, impulsiveness, regret? It's the flesh. That's the flesh talking. If it results in peace, clarity, patience, love, self-control, that's the spirit talking, okay? And the fruit of the spirit never lies. It's that flesh. So we definitely got to pay attention to resistance. Flesh resists anything that leads to spiritual growth. So understand that. So if you feel sudden resistance to praying, forgiving, confessing, serving, reading scripture, if you feel resistance to any of these, being still, those are, resistance itself is a sign of the flesh. All right. Okay, so this is just things that you need to know. Is this coming from my need to control, or from God's spirit leading me? So those are the things that you need to see to know the difference about who's leading you, the spirit or the flesh. Or do you have like all that stuff mixed up together? Because sometimes we do. Because, is a natural thing for our flesh to act naturally or to react as such. But then when you want to be more of a spiritual person, you got to look at the difference. That's why some people saying, oh, these people go to worship, but when they come out, they be the same person or the same way. They keep going to worship, but they haven't changed. that we still the same person. So what is we going for? Are we going for, because we recognize that the Spirit is working within us? So we go to worship. We go to worship to know that this church is changing in here. Okay. And we are part of that body. We're part of that body, of God, his church. Okay. So how can we go out and tell others if we still look the same? Because now what they saying is you can't tell the difference between the people inside or the people outside of the worship centers. All right. Well, blessings into you. I thank you for allowing me to be in your presence. I am that reporter reporting to you the way, the truth, and life. Continue to always stop by. Hopefully we can be here every Monday. That's going to be our goal. And if not, we always will send you a word or two, but blessings and peace and love unto you. Have a good day.